On today's episode, what the Nick Daicos injury means for Collingwood's finals race and the Brownlow. We take a look at some trade targets for GWS and the Hawks, and where are we at with the Richmond and Suns coaching positions. All that and more on today's episode of Zero Hangout TV. All right, so straight into it. So Nick Daicos is out for about 6 weeks with a hairline fracture in his knee, due to return maybe the first 2 weeks of finals. So what does that mean for Collingwood?
Yeah, interesting 3 weeks to come for them. They've been sitting on top of the ladder quite comfortably for most of the season. Still a 2-win gap over them with 3 rounds to go, and you'd think they'll take out the minor premiership. But yeah, the injury is obviously a very significant one for their system and just how well they'll roll into the finals. Return date, best case, maybe second week of finals. Obviously, if they win that first week, even finishing top 4, then they can bank on a week off and then roll into a preliminary final. So there'll be a bit to play out there, and obviously how he recovers. They've kind of said that they're not looking too far, and things could take a turn for the good, which obviously they'll be very keen to see. But as far as short term, it's going to be very interesting to have a look at how they plan for these last 3 games, starting with Geelong on Friday night at the MCG. Now they've lost that run, that reliable kicking from that back third through midfield and into attack. So who do we see step up? Expect Oleg Markov to obviously hold a starting role for the last 3 weeks to have that run. Will Josh Daicos step up? Do they turn their midfield priorities back towards a Jordan De Goey to lead from the front? It's just such a significant loss because when they're at the coalface, when they're right in the middle of it, and they're looking for an outlet, Nick Daicos was always there, just giving constant run, constant options on the outside as well, and winning his own ball and just clean ball movement. So, very significant loss. And it can't be understated how big of a loss Nathan Murphy could be in these last 3 weeks. As mentioned, no guarantee to finish on top of the ladder. And if they do manage to slide, it could be a big factor not having him in their back line as well. So, big double blow for the Pies.
Yeah. So, obviously, blow for the Pies. What does that mean for the Brownlow race, though? Because Nick Daicos was probably projected to take it home.
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting now. 3 rounds, and the Bont probably had a 3-vote game on Friday night as well. Makes it very interesting. I'm thinking you probably might still have a 5-vote buffer between Daicos and Bontempelli. Certainly could be shorter than that. And with the way the Bont's playing at the moment, keeps up a couple of good games, and he could certainly take the lead or even have a tie. And I don't think you'd rule Christian Petrarca out of that mix as well. We'll have a bit more on maybe where those things stand in our MVP segment. But another thing that's certainly been shaken up with the Daicos injury.
Yeah. All right. So moving over to the Richmond and the Suns. So is Dimma, is he signed or what's going on there?
I can't say for sure. Obviously last week it was revealed that he's had an offer put to him from the Suns, and it seems like it'd be a bit of a surprise if he wasn't coaching them round 1 next year. Obviously there's a decision to be made and a fair bit to still play out, but it's all pointing that way. It's a 1-horse race, just like North Melbourne had with Clarko last year. They're not looking at anyone else, it sounds like. So target on one man, and if he's happy to, then they'll get their man. So not too much, I guess, to add as far as the Suns coaching job.
Yep. And so Richmond, McQualter are still in prime position, but they did lose pretty significantly to the Suns on the weekend.
The Dogs.
The Dogs, sorry.
Dogs, yeah, that's all right. I don't know how much it hurts his chances. I think he's still backed in as probably the favourite. And they'll start, I think, a process quite soon. They've put their subcommittee together, and obviously the next step is kind of reaching out to potential candidates. Who that'll be, I think Josh Carr is one that's been flagged as one that they'll certainly look at, has been quite key as Ken Hinkley's right-hand man at Alberton Oval, and then 2 others that have kind of haven't said that they've been in contact, but have both certainly hinted that they'd be keen to take part in the process is Melbourne assistants Adam Uze and Troy Chaplin. Obviously Chaplin, a former Tiger himself, and Adam Uze has run for a few senior coaching jobs, has gone into a couple processes as probably the favourite to land a job, I think at GWS and Essendon, and then hasn't quite stuck it. So he'll be an interesting one if he's involved. Chaplin, Carr, and there's probably going to be a couple others as well as McQualter. But the current Tigers interim is still the favourite, I think. Whether they make finals or not, I would like to think.
Yep. All right, so moving over to the rookie rankings, and only one real change. The rest of the top 8 looks pretty set, but Sheasel taking top spot.
Yeah, we kind of flagged it last week that it wasn't going to take too much for Harry Sheasel to move back into first and probably hold that for the rest of the season. Obviously, Will Ashcroft out for the rest of the year. He'll stay in second and Sheasel stay in first for the last 3 weeks. And then from then onwards, it is still kind of tight in a few spots. So I think Bailey Humphrey and Max Michelini probably separated by slimmest of margins in that. And after those two played off against each other, I think Michelini maybe came away from that result with some more credit. So he's certainly pushing for that podium finish. And then you've got the likes of Judd McVie. I think he's pretty comfortable in that spot. Ruben Jinby, which we kind of said last week, he's probably not going to fall too far back. But Josh Weddle and Elijah Hewitt were really, really good on the weekend. Weddle in that win over Collingwood, and Hewitt had some good glimpses in that loss to Essendon. So it might be interesting to see just how well those two go in the last 3 weeks and whether they can break into the top 6. Another one to mention, Oliver Hollins. He's probably, if we had a 9th spot, he's probably in that after how he's returned from injury in the last couple of weeks with the Blues.
Yep. Nice. All right, so moving over to some trade targets. So we'll start with GWS. So they're looking like they're probably going to make finals. So who would they be looking at, though, in the trade period?
Yeah, you'll probably look at maybe some players that they've been linked to or have been linked to previously, and maybe a forward. So a couple of names that we'll probably look at, and if you want to talk probably forwards at the start, they're probably not going to go for a big out tall forward. Obviously, Jake Riccardi's future is a bit up in the air, and we'll get on that in a second, but they locked in Harry Himmelberg, which is a huge one for them last week. But attention now probably turns to maybe an assisting medium to tall-sized forward. So you look at your Mitch Georgiades, Jack Silvani, Harrison Jones, these kind of guys that are still off contract and unsigned next year. Another one who I think they were interested in, Hugo Ralph Smith, at the end of last year when they were trying to sort some deals to get Jacob Hopper to Richmond. His name was lifted in those talks, and obviously the Tigers shut down pretty quickly, but he's now unsigned for next year as well. So another one. And then a kind of left field one that we haven't really used in our trade target series this year is the draft pick, and that being pick 1. They've got the selections. Do they certainly kind of look at trading for pick 1 like they did last year and moving to the top of the board and kind of adding to their list that way? So that's some of the ones for the Giants.
Yep. And so we're also going to take a look at some trade targets for the Hawks. So they're looking, they look like they might come home in pretty decent shape compared to the other sort of seller dollars down there. So who would they be looking at in the trade period?
Well, yeah, a lot of their focus will still be on the draft, but that still hasn't stopped them from maybe looking to add some role players or some guys that are certainly going to help this rebuild under Sam Mitchell. Now, Jake Riccardi, as we mentioned before, is one that has already been linked to the Hawks earlier this season. Salvaredegli is another one, but whether there'll be a front runner for him remains to be seen. As we mentioned with GWS, Mitch Georgiades, pretty decent forward, I think, to have as a 2IC for Mitch Lewis. And then a couple others, Kyle Lohman for Brisbane, still unsigned for next year. Close mates with Sam Butler at the Hawks, so that's one to consider. And Sam Flanders, another one yet to have a contract with the Suns and has hit some great form as a nice depth midfield player that the Hawks could look at. So that's 5 for Hawthorn to consider.
Yep. Awesome. And to finish up, as always, we're going to take a look at our MVP. So obviously, Daicos' season is over at 197 points, which means Bontempelli is taking the lead.
Yeah. So Daicos has held the lead has been right at the top for just about all the year. Now, won't win it. Obviously carried the lead into the weekend, but the Bont pulled a perfect 20 game. Christian Petrarca had, I think, 18 votes as well, and they both leapfrogged Daicos to now be ahead of him. And yeah, with his season over, he won't be able to win it. So Bont at 216, Petrarca at 213. Kind of gives them, it's not necessarily too stress. There are some that's still in contention, but just to kind of give you some reflection, both Patrick Cripps and Tuke Miller took out the award last year on 210. The year before that, our first MVP season, Ollie Wines had 255 votes, which both the Bont and Petrarca could chase down in the last 3 weeks. But that's kind of where we've seen our leaders finish up in the past few seasons. And with Cripps and with Wines, they both took out the Brownlow. So like we said earlier, it could be the case for either Bontempelli or Petrarca.
Yep. And with 3 weeks left in the season, who else is maybe capable of winning it now that...
Yeah, it'd be tough. So a few of those guys in the chasing pack, Lachie Neale, Toby Green, Tim Taranto. I think Jordan Dawson can make it, but would I think the best he can do is tie with the Bont, assuming the Bont goes voteless, as with Petrarca. So there is a couple of guys, and one other, Errol Goulden. He's polled in, I think, his last 7 games. I think 3 of those are 20 vote games, and one of them was a 19 vote game. So he's flying at the moment, and he's in reaching distance. But for those guys, a lot would have to go their way in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, Errol making a late charge, just like the 20s.
Yep.
All right, so that wraps it up for Zero Hanger today. So if you want to get involved in Zero Hanger, you can send in questions or messages on our socials. We usually put a post out asking for questions on our Instagram. But thanks, Mitch.
Thanks, Mitch.
Don't forget you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can catch all the latest AFL news at zerohanger.com.